The polar vortex has just collapsed in one of the most dramatic atmospheric events we've seen in years. And this is going to completely reshape the weather pattern across the United States through the rest of February and possibly into March. Right now, we're dealing with a stratospheric warming event that's causing the polar vortex to split and stretch like never before, sending wave after wave of Arctic air southward. But this isn't just another cold snap. We're looking at a pattern that could lock in place for weeks, bringing multiple rounds of dangerous winter storms, record-breaking cold, and potentially catastrophic ice events. The latest forecast models are showing something truly extraordinary: a polar vortex core that's stretched from the high Arctic all the way down to central Canada, with temperatures running 30 to 40 degrees below normal across massive portions of the country. And here's the kicker. This polar disruption is colliding with a massive atmospheric wave called the Madden-Julian Oscillation, creating a rare interference pattern that meteorologists are struggling to predict. So in today's forecast, I'm going to break down exactly what this polar vortex collapse means for your area, the multiple winter storms that are lining up, and why this could be the most significant weather pattern change we've seen all winter. Now, let me start by explaining what's happening in the atmosphere right now, because this is absolutely fascinating and terrifying at the same time. The polar vortex, which normally sits up near the North Pole containing all that frigid Arctic air, has essentially broken apart. We're seeing what's called a stratospheric warming event, where temperatures high up in the atmosphere, about 10 to 30 miles above the surface, are rapidly warming. This sounds counterintuitive, but when this happens, it destabilizes the entire polar circulation system. Think of it like a spinning top that suddenly wobbles and loses its balance. The polar vortex can no longer contain all that Arctic air, so it gets displaced and stretched out, sending lobes of incredibly cold air plunging southward. What makes this event so unique is that it's happening at the same time as a massive atmospheric wave called the Madden-Julian Oscillation is moving through. This creates a rare interference pattern where the effects of the polar vortex collapse are being temporarily masked in some areas by warmer air aloft, but then reinforced in others. It's like having two powerful weather engines working against each other, and the result is this incredibly complex and dangerous weather pattern that's going to unfold over the next several weeks. The latest computer models are showing the most stretched polar vortex on record, extending from Siberia all the way across the North Pole to parts of North America. This is unprecedented territory, and it's why we're seeing such extreme cold penetrating so far south. Right now, the immediate impacts are already being felt across the northern plains and upper Midwest, where wind chills have dropped to minus 50 degrees in some areas. But this is just the beginning. Over the next few days, this Arctic air mass is going to continue pushing southward, and by this weekend, we're looking at temperatures 30 to 40 degrees below normal, stretching from Canada all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Cities like Dallas could see their coldest temperatures in over a decade, with highs struggling to get out of the teens. Chicago might not get above zero for several days straight, and even places like Atlanta and Birmingham could see single-digit temperatures, which is extremely rare for this time of year. But the cold is only part of the story. What's really concerning meteorologists is how this polar pattern is going to interact with moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific to create a series of potentially devastating winter storms. We're already seeing the setup for the first major storm this weekend, where this Arctic air is going to clash with Gulf moisture to create what could be a historic ice storm across parts of the South. The Weather Prediction Center is forecasting up to 2 inches of ice accumulation in some areas, which would be absolutely catastrophic for power grids and infrastructure. We're talking about the potential for widespread power outages that could last for weeks in some areas, especially when you factor in the prolonged cold that's going to follow. The snow threat is equally concerning. Models are showing the potential for widespread heavy snow from the southern plains all the way up into New England, with some areas possibly seeing over a foot of accumulation. The exact track of these storms is still uncertain, but cities like Oklahoma City, Little Rock, Nashville, and even places as far south as Birmingham could see significant snow. And then, as the storm moves east, The Mid-Atlantic and Northeast are looking at the possibility of another major snow event, potentially rivaling some of the biggest storms we've seen in recent years. What's particularly dangerous about this setup is the prolonged nature of the cold that's going to follow these storms. Normally, after a winter storm passes through the south, temperatures warm up relatively quickly, and any ice or snow melts away. But with this polar vortex pattern locked in place, we're looking at the possibility of snow and ice staying on the ground for days or even weeks in some areas. This creates a compounding effect where each new storm builds on the previous one, leading to increasingly dangerous conditions. The timing couldn't be worse either. We're heading into President's Day weekend, which is typically a busy travel period, and the impacts on transportation are going to be severe. Airlines are already starting to cancel flights proactively, and we could see thousands of cancellations over the next week. Road travel is going to be extremely hazardous, if not impossible, across large portions of the country. And for areas that do get hit by significant ice storms, we're talking about the possibility of impassable roads for extended periods. Now, looking ahead beyond this immediate threat, the long-range forecast models are showing that this polar pattern could persist well into March. The stratospheric warming event that triggered this polar vortex collapse typically has effects that last for 4 to 6 weeks, which means we could be dealing with repeated rounds of Arctic air and winter storms through the rest of winter and potentially into early spring. Some models are even suggesting the possibility of another major polar vortex disruption later in February, which could reinforce this pattern even more. For areas that have been relatively mild this winter, and there have been many, this is going to be a shocking transition. Places like Florida that have been enjoying warm weather could see temperatures drop into the 20s and 30s, which would be devastating for agriculture and could lead to issues with frozen pipes in homes that aren't designed for such cold. The energy grid is going to be under tremendous stress as heating demand skyrockets across the country. But perhaps most concerning is how this pattern could affect vulnerable populations. Extended power outages combined with life-threatening cold creates an extremely dangerous situation, especially for elderly residents and those without adequate heating sources. Emergency management agencies across the country are already starting to prepare for what could be a prolonged emergency situation. The economic impacts are also going to be significant. We're looking at the potential for billions of dollars in damage from ice storms, transportation disruptions that could affect supply chains, and energy costs that could spike dramatically as heating demand soars. Some areas could see natural gas and electricity prices reach crisis levels if the cold persists as long as models suggest. For snow lovers, this might sound exciting, but the reality is that this type of extreme weather pattern brings more challenges than benefits. Yes, ski areas that have been struggling with warm weather and rain could finally see significant snowfall, but the accompanying extreme cold and dangerous travel conditions overshadow any positive aspects. So what does all this mean for you? First and foremost, now is the time to prepare for extended periods of cold weather and possible power outages. Make sure you have adequate heating sources that don't rely on electricity, stock up on non-perishable food and water, and have a plan for staying warm if the power goes out. If you live in an area prone to ice storms, consider staying off the roads entirely once the weather starts. And keep your vehicles winterized and equipped with emergency supplies in case you get stranded. For farmers and those with livestock, this pattern is going to require careful planning to protect animals and prevent pipe freezing. And for anyone with travel plans over the next few weeks, stay flexible and monitor forecasts closely because this pattern is going to create widespread disruptions. The bottom line is that we're entering a potentially historic stretch of winter weather that could rank among the most significant we've seen in years. The polar vortex collapse has fundamentally changed the atmospheric pattern, and the effects are going to be felt for weeks to come. This isn't just another winter storm. It's a pattern change that's going to dominate the weather story across the United States for the foreseeable future. Stay informed, stay prepared, and take this threat seriously. Winter has finally arrived with a vengeance, and it's going to be a rough ride through the rest of February and beyond. And as always, thank you all so much for watching today's forecast. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We'll be tracking this historic pattern closely over the coming weeks, so turn on those notifications and we'll keep you updated with all the latest developments. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you in the next one.